a way to track all the, and I'll say, conversation and planning surrounding each of these items. So the administrators who we've asked to work on the various subsections will send a document to my office. We're going to hyperlink it to the tracker so that we always know where we are in each of these items. Because the thing with a grant is, if you're going to make, you can make some adjustments. If you've said, like on the left column, if you've said this is how you're going to spend it, if you realize that there is no longer a need there, you can make adjustments, but it requires communication and approval in some cases. And we really want to make sure we know what did we apply for originally and what are we now doing with it. In the event of audit, we need to make sure we have a really clear path that we followed in expending and operationalizing all of the various federal funds. So just so you're aware, it is well underway in the background, and you will be seeing some things coming through, hearing about some updates to our programming as a result of the federal funds.
Any questions? Thank you, Dr. Wood.
So as Elizabeth transitioned, and again, I'm going to figure out how to get, so you can, as a board, can look at this and track through it without, because as you see, it's a lot of moving parts. And some grants are designed, like the gear one was the one that came out early with the governor's office. And however, we couldn't apply to any of them until now. And so the point I'm making with that is we had to go through a very extensive approval process before we could spend any money. And so now we're at the point now, okay, let's plan forward. And there's some lobbying effort afoot to say, because it took so long for states to gear up and schools to gear up, will they extend that 3-year window out versus now being a 2-year and 2-month window to get what should have been done in 3 years. So we see how those advocacy things pop out as well. So I hope the board has appreciation of the level of detail that we're talking about to really track it. You're talking about events, little people writing, what are we meeting, what are we doing, how we do, all those kind of things. Because what we can't have is 4 or 5 years from now, we audited, which we've had, and someone's coming in and say, how did you spend the funds back in 22, 23? And the people who they're talking to are like, oh, I wasn't in this position. So what we need to have is everything documented to the nth detail, how we do it for the audit purposes. And because of that motivation, it forces us to really, really think about, is this the best use of the dollars? And is the best use of dollars in terms of things we can sustain, want to sustain, or things that are one-time expenditures as we move forward. So I hope you have that appreciation from this. Again, intent was not to, because we'll be here till midnight if we were to walk through every one of these things. So that certainly was not the intent. So let me, any other thing that, so Bob, I'm sorry.
So are we going to be spending 100%, 90%, or the intent is to spend everything we can as long as we don't create this cliff?
So yeah, over the course of the
2 to 3 years.
2 years, 2 months, 2 to 3 years. Yes, that's the intent.
Okay.
And this is literally down to the penny. And we had to literally account. So I can show you some crazy things. We had to do the calculations backwards to make everything absolutely work down to the penny because they weren't approving if you were above or below it. So we go through that process. Okay. Good. So as Callie is the one of the partners with Mosaic and the lead attorney. We got lawyers on my head. The lead architect, along with Todd. Todd is not here tonight. That facilitated a lot of our projects, and so this document was shared with the board. So Callie, we can just kind of walk through this, and then maybe I could just show some pictures after.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. So I know that you have the entire document, so I won't go into great detail, and feel free to ask any questions. But as part of this project, part of the referendum, we're doing it in 3 phases, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that we wanted to get some work done as soon as possible, and it would have been impossible to design, get everything through SED, and get it all started this summer. So we pulled out a bunch of the more straightforward items, things that are more readily available, that we know we can get done this summer, or maybe a little bit into the fall, but they're things that won't be disruptive to the students. So that was part of it. Phase 2, which will happen in the summer of 2023, is where really the bulk of the work happens, And that is some of the more exciting things that we'll talk about in a moment. And then there is a phase 3 that's not until the summer of 2024. And the reasoning for that is an aidability piece for your turf field. The turf and the track needs to be resurfaced, but right now you're still getting aid on the initial installation of it. So you can't get more building aid until that period ends. So come the summer of 2024, we'll be able to do that work which is needed and get building aid on it. So we have a couple of things slated for that summer as well.
So Callie, before you go into
Sure.
details, just talk to, so part of the process is the design process. Other part of the process is the approval process. Something we did, we paid a little more to get expedited reviews. So can you just talk about that? So in other words, so we're not at SED for 4 months, we might be at SED for 4 weeks. So we get these projects up and running. So we're doing that cost differential of paying whatever, $10,000 for expedited review versus if a project is delayed 6 or 8 months, the cost escalation far outweigh anything that we could expend for the expedited review. So I'm sharing that with, again, with the board because, you know, people hear about project, they're waiting for it to be constructed, but we have to think about all these approaches to, one, to minimize the length of time, and two, then recognizing that the cost of construction certainly it's not going down. It's going up, and so if we can minimize the timeline, we minimize the potential exposure to price escalations. And you hear sometimes people say the project's over budget. It's not because people are doing more than they anticipated. It's because by the time they get around to doing it, what they initially thought and what it is significantly different. So we're trying to minimize that time gap as much as we possibly can.
Exactly. So I think you pretty much said most of what I would say. But yeah, so we did the third-party review process for this phase 1A, or phase 1 rather. We actually got full approval today, which is much sooner than we would have if we had not gone the third-party route. That means we're going to be able to get out to bid very soon, which means we'll get much more competitive bids. I actually, Todd and I were just talking this afternoon, and somebody on our team warned us that another district has a big bid coming out soon, so we're going to make sure that we get out ahead of them. That is our goal. But the third-party process really paid off significantly, and as Dr. Robinson said, the money that you paid for that process is going to be nothing compared to the money that you're going to save by getting out early and getting these materials ordered.
Cassie, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure thing.
Callie.
Oh, Callie, sorry. Who is the third party?
It is another architectural firm. Oh, geez.
Something,
EI Team is the name of them. So there are several architectural firms that participate, and typically we would, someone from not around this area would review the drawings of someone from this area. So EI Team, I think they may be out in Rochester.
Yeah.
They were the third-party reviewer, and what they do, they review it as SED would, put together comments and send them to us. We, address them and everything. But then SED does go back and do like a very quick, they call it the QA/QC review, just to make sure that everything got picked up. That's a health and safety item.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I have a real question and a dumb question. With all the supply chain stuff going on right now, do we think anything might delay or? I know that's unpredictable too, but I mean, are we seeing anything right now that's throwing us off our plans? Or?
We're feeling pretty good with the items that we picked. You'll see in phase 1, one of the big things is the parking and paving at High School East, in the back of High School East. So paving, we shouldn't have any issues with that. Roofing is one of the items that has been, the lead times have been going up, but I have heard recently that some of them are starting to come back down. So we do have some roofing in the first phase of the project. Right now, we feel that it will be done in time. If not, though, we do have ways to get it finished without disrupting anything.
Ready for the dumb one?
Ready.
So, I was looking at the turf. And it's really cool, but it's also kind of weird. There's so many different lines for all the different sports. I imagine that's just normal now, and it's okay. But that I'm guessing is not confusing or
It's not as it is pretty normal, right?
Yeah.
And certain lines are much more pronounced than other lines, and even that too. We try to minimize, because here's what happens: like not every team wants to have their, and then you have a whole bunch of. So we try to have you know, some of the major, some certain sports that require certain major lines on there as we move forward. That's always the proverbial, whose line's on first, whose line's on not, whose line's darker, whose line's lighter, and that's a constant piece, yeah, for us. So that's going to be a great resource for phys ed, for sports, for community use, tremendous resource.
My daughter's very excited.
Yeah, the football field, I mean, the football field,
Yeah.
you're switching soccer for football, really, and the other lines are the same.
Yeah.
So that's the only, my opinion. I don't know, I could be wrong.
Dr. Robinson, I have one more question. It has to do with, so I saw that all the elementary schools, they're in one of the phases for upgrading their, you know, to get air conditioning. Did we not include the middle schools in the original proposal?
No, this proposal, and the reason why I included elementary schools is because we already had the unit component was
Yeah.
there, and so it's now attaching the chiller component to it.
Okay.
And so that's why it was feasible, if you will, to do the elementary schools. At some point, that came up, at some point, referendum, whatever, that would be, and again, you also, so it's not only the size, but the complication of retrofitting a lot of things for the first time for it. The elementary schools literally had all the components, infrastructure, the guts there, and now it's putting the chiller to make it work. So that's why this became a feasible one for us to do for the elementary schools.
Okay, but it's not, so it is something that is being planned for down.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the things that we've been trying to, over time, phase these major things in, because you're always juxtaposing between, you know, what's the best use of resources. And one that you see all the time that we always have to, this ironically here, on elementary school is tons of abatement. Literally every time we do anything anywhere, asbestos abatement become a major part of any projects. And so I use that for example of, is it our first priority to do? No, but it's a must do in order to do anything else. And so we're always trying to balance all those things as well. So yes, it's short answer, yes. It's certainly one of those things that's on the docket, if you will, as we plan forward for future referendums or whatever they might be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It just is a much bigger undertaking than the elementary schools because they were all set up for future air conditioning, and the future is now. So we're going to install that air conditioning. All right.
So let me ask this for board's purposes. I don't want to shortchange Callie, but if you had some of this document, or if there's specific questions you have, because what I actually like to do, if you don't mind, is just for instance, Callie, if you just want to explain just some of the pictures, because sometimes pictures say 1,000 words in terms of some of the areas that you can see the visual pieces that we're looking to do.
Yes,
This one,
definitely.
Callie, you want to walk through this one?
Yeah, so this is a site plan of your campus, and the color-coded things in here are in back here, this red that goes behind High School East and around the back. That is the paving work that's going to happen in phase 1. So in the back of High School East, we will be removing that island and making a parking lot there. You're going to almost double your parking out there. We've also made, some reconfiguration so it's easier to get the house out that the students build. It's been traditionally very hard for a truck to get back there and get that out. So we've made a lot of modifications back there. So that's what, yes, exactly. That's what that is. And the new paving is actually going to go all the way out to where we did paving previously. So you'll have nice smooth surfaces across the campus. There we've got the tennis courts and the track and the field.
And that's in phase 3, correct?
Those are in phase 3, yep, exactly. So those are the things we're talking about with the aid ability. We need to wait until 2024 in order to get aid on it. Then we're doing the parking lot over by High School West, by the Sill and IMS, that whole parking lot area there, and back out to the campus road.
We go to pick 2 for the Cal.
Alrighty. Okay, so right here in this building, this is one of the more exciting projects. We're doing a lot of reconfiguration here. You'll see the flooring and ceiling work. That's some of that asbestos abatement that Dr. Robinson was talking about. But even that, though, as minimal as it is really going to spruce things up, make things a lot brighter. But kind of the fun portion, at least for us, is we will be taking the main office, the guidance and the nurses suites and bringing them over here so they are going to be accessible, much more easily accessible by parents, others coming into the building. And it also allows us to create a secure vestibule like what you did at the high school. So in moving all of those down to this area where there's currently 2 art rooms, we're going to put 2 art rooms back, and then by being efficient with the way we lay things out, we're able to get 2 extra classrooms as well. So we'll have 2 art rooms and 2 classrooms, and all of the guidance, the main office, and the nurse will be here, accessible from the main entrance. And then we're also renovating science rooms over there, so getting them to be similar to what we did in the high school.
And that will be done in 22?
23.
no,
Yes,
so
sorry,
phase
I
two.
should have said that.
It's
Phase 2.
Okay.
Phase 2.
Phase 2.
Yep.
In fact, we're meeting Monday? What, could be this
Maybe
week?
tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's
To
tomorrow.
finalize, to put the initial on the plan, to say, this is what we want to send to SED.
Yes.
This was last week we spoke. Yeah,
Yep.
time flies.
It
You're not
does.
having fun.
It does.
So this is pretty neat. So this is all this, and then going to turn into all that across the hall.
That's cool.
So it's pretty neat when you think about it. That's going to be transformational here in the middle school for Guam in many, many ways. So pretty excited about that, that piece of the project. Pick 3 real quick. Kelly, again, this is not, this is a Ranjan work.
Yeah, not as exciting, but we're replacing boilers at Oranjan. We're also replacing windows, the clear story windows they're called. They're the ones that are up high by the ramp. And also in the vestibules there, you have some glass block. We're going to take that glass block out and replace it with aluminum storefront framing like you see at most of your other entrances, much more efficient.
Yeah, so Oranjan is designed to be an outdoor kind of, it's like a kind of building you build in South Florida or California, but somebody built it in the Northeast because they thought it was cute.
Wasn't us.
Yeah, it wasn't their architectural firm. So that's right, Callie. So this is the last piece here.
Yes, and this is the multi-purpose fields that we were talking about. And you're right, they do have a lot of lines. I find them a little bit confusing, but everybody, this is kind of the standard these days. It allows you to get much more use out of it. And the main focus of this actually was for PE class and recreation during the day for the middle school students. But then, of course, with all of the lines and the way it's laid out, it can be used by the athletics as well.
Are there going to be, is there going to be seating on the outsides of each?
Well,
Like I can foresee, like if there's games or something there.
Well, we won't, seating is not built into this.
Okay.
Will there be space, depends on how the field is used, right, along
Right.
sidelines. Because what we weren't building another stadium.
Right. But I mean, even
yeah.
if you've got, if you look at that, there's nobody, like if there's 2 events going on, if there's 2 lacrosse games, boys and girls on each field, let's say, you're not going to have anybody in the middle.
No,
Yeah, it's
no,
gonna
more
be on the
likely,
outside.
so remember we have that road pathway right now, that's like the spectator path?
Yeah.
On this side, and then on this side to the far tree line, that could be a potential area that we'll do some piece, depends on how the fields are being utilized. And again, the primary premise of this is increasing accessibility and addressing almost year-round utilization of facilities. I mean, obviously we have cold, 10 inches of snow days, that's a whole different situation. But if you just see the utilization of the high school field, it's a perfect example. It's used quite a bit, certainly more so than if we didn't have a turf field. So it's going to be pretty exciting for programs across the board, as well as community use. I mean, when you think about doing May, we have more little kid programs, from 4 o'clock on these facilities, and we will continue to do so because those needs are still there. We just having a better field situation for them to practice and play on. So it's pretty exciting about this piece of it. So again, I wanted to bring the board up to snuff because this things are rolling, and so you have some awareness of how the pieces that we're looking to do and the why. And I think the why piece is more important on why things are phased in. Some of it just because of simpler time to design and go through the process. Some of it is the aidability piece that Callie mentioned, because I know people saying, well, why don't you upgrade the other field at the same time you do another field? Because we can, but we lose millions of dollars in aid, and so why would we do that? And necessarily just push it off the following year and maximize aidability. And that field is in fairly good condition. We recognize that we have some cracks now in the track that are we have to watch, particularly after this winter season, because, you know, we have typically they expand during the thaw and freeze kind of thing. So we'll watch those as we move forward.
One more question, I
No
promise I'm
problem.
done. No, this has to do with the roof replacement over High School East. So there, I was asking Mr. Nardelli about this before the meeting, about where the solar panels are, because I thought they were right over that main auditorium, and so is the plan to keep those in place?
I believe the area that we're roofing, I do not believe is the same area that has the solar panels. And unfortunately, I don't have a drawing with me right now of the exact area.
Okay.
But Todd and I were actually talking about the solar panels today, and we were talking about the roofing, and I believe this roofing that we're doing as part of this project does not have the solar panels, but the roofing with the solar panels is coming up due for warranty pretty soon.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And we actually had someone look at those solar panels not too long ago. They're actually in pretty good shape. I mean, they don't generate a ton of power because this is more of a pilot piece, so to speak, but they're still there in pretty good shape, and so, yeah, so if we could preserve that or expand on it, we'll see what the future holds, particularly with solar power and where some of those things are going and what funding the state might have. Because that was a NYSERDA grant that we did those panels as a part of a NYSERDA grant years back now. So we'll see, again, technology is changing tremendously, so who knows?
Yeah, and that's something, when we do get to that portion of the roof, that's something we'll do. We'll look at, is it worth removing them and reinstalling them back on the roof? That's what most, a lot of people do, but given the age of them, would it be worth upgrading or doing something different at this point? But that's not the roof that's in this project.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
You good?
Yeah, we're good.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Todd.
Todd.
Appreciate you coming over.
Thank you.
Thanks. So this will be pretty brief because we're still in the process of filling in the dates. But again, I'm being cognizant that we have new board members and people may have heard about the Budget Roadshow and say, what is the Budget Roadshow? So essentially, you'll see we try to hit a lot of places, internal meetings, PTA meetings, community conversation meetings, talk about the budget. So we have a lot of all the PTA faculty meetings. We go outside and go to the town board meetings. We go to the Senior Citizen Center in Half Moon. So we try to hit all these meetings. So Vanessa's in the process right now. We don't have all the dates down pat. We're trying to get all the dates organized and coordinated. And either myself or Kathy will split between who's going to where. And oftentimes in one night we're running late for one and early for the next one kind of thing. Virtually last year helped us quite a bit because we could just a matter of clicking from one web link to the next web link. But that's a great way for us to promote the budget. And one of the things too, that there's certain ones, for instance, like I know like the town of Half Moon, it's a board meeting, but it's also they celebrate their senior citizens at that same meeting. So it's a great opportunity for us to be with two different groups at the same time. In the past, we've had board members attend. Certainly, particularly any outside one, we certainly encourage board members to attend if you're available. Attending the faculty meeting, I'm not saying you can't attend, but I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to attend. But certainly PTA meetings, a lot of you are represented on PTA, so you know when we're going to come to that PTA meeting. But certainly for those like the town board meeting ones is another one that, again, encourage board members to attend some of those as well. If you want to comment on that, Deanna, because you've been on the road show with me every time, all last year and otherwise.
Yeah, and by the end, I can probably, I told them, you can just sit here, I can do it myself. But no, it's a great way to see everybody, and it's just another community outreach too. You have the opportunity to see what's going on outside and the reaction of some. The town of Half Moon is kind of special. We always get a good turnout for that because it is during the day, like early, like 11:30, 12, something like that. So it is good.
So as we finalize this, we'll certainly get it to you, and so you can start looking at your schedules, and the PTA individuals will know, so you probably hear about it based upon your liaison responsibilities. The second quick update, and I say a quick update because there's already a lot of news. This is a lot of, essentially what I provided to the board was, I didn't write it, so I can't even take credit for it. Executive summary, a lot of places, like NISBA did an executive summary, NISCUS did a executive summary, so a lot of the state agencies did it, and quite frankly, they're very similar because they get the state budget book, which is 200 plus pages, and try to summarize that in ways that's more applicable to schools. So just a couple quick things that clearly the thing that we were watching, the bigger financial piece is, again, let me back up for a second. So this is the executive budget. This is the governor's budget. So it could be this week, maybe maybe you know, Jason, the time sequence, but the Senate and the Assembly will be coming out with their one house budgets. And so you have the governor's budget, the Assembly budget, the Senate budget. So that's creating the three-person in the room equation. Then they come together and they come out with one final legislative budget to put forth for the legislature to adopt prior to. So right now, the good thing is the governor's budget is very fiscally strong for New York and for schools. And in fact, I was on a call today, and John McDonald, who represents particularly Rensselaer County and is a very good friend to Shenandoah School District, was very positive about where the Assembly will be coming in with their budget, probably very consistent with many of the things that the governor. So it's great to hear that. And so we anticipate that the budgets will come together faster than not in the April 1st deadline that we're always waiting to see. Are they going to meet the deadline? That deadline will be met, and sooner the better, because then we can literally plan forward with actual numbers. And so big part of this was the foundation aid. Fully funding the foundation aid was a big piece of the governor's budget, and also a big part of our advocacy that we spoke about last week. And so we're looking forward to see this how it's going to play out for Shen. We have been underfunded under the formula, so to get fully funding over the course of the next 2 years is a major benefit for us as a school system, as well as for our community at large. So we're looking at how that's going to finalize as we move forward. That's a big piece of it. We're watching. There's some other neat things in here I just want to point out real quick. That's this kind of, in fact, tonight, you might, Al Karam is should be on the news tonight, talking about some modifications related to transportation, related to some of the processes that makes it so long to hire drivers, some of the process related to the retirement pieces when you're retired, how much money you can make. And so there's some neat things in here that I think not only going to benefit from a pure budgetary state aid piece, but also some operational pieces that we're looking to do as well. There's even a piece that speaks to, and I know that there's some back and forth right now with the state education department and trying to move food services out of the state education department to Department of Agriculture, and there's some territorial fighting, to say the least. So I'm not sure where that one's going to go. So we're going to watch that for Canadian food services. We're trying to watch that to see what's going to be the long-term benefit for food service program. So those are the things that typically you don't hear about when you hear about the budget piece, because people stop at the money. But oftentimes it's those other operational things that make a huge difference for school districts moving forward. So again, the retiree income waiver is another big one for us, because you know, we have retirees, and Mr. Flint is a perfect example of someone who's very effective for us, because he's fairly recent to the system, knows process, knows protocol, can hit the ground running, but he's hamstringed by how much he could earn. And so hopefully this provides some flexibility for schools to tap into retirees, especially at a time when we're struggling with staff shortages in many areas. So we hope for this opportunity. Right now there's a process say to maybe keep it until 2024. So we'll see how that pans out in the final budget. So again, I'm not going to walk through every pieces, because I think the summary is pretty comprehensive, but I just certainly want to share with the board some of the inside baseball on some of the pieces that I think that we're going to watch closely beyond the money piece. Let me just stop there, see if there are any thoughts, comments.
So previous years, there was sort of a lumping in of the BOCES.
Combined in all 8 categories?
And we thought that was a bad idea. Is that?
That's not even on the radar screen.
Okay, thank you.
Because it was such a bad idea.
Okay.
So no, great question, because we watch that every year to see where they're going to see them move that piece of it. So as Mrs. Carmen, you want me to keep transitioning? As Mrs. Carmen comes forward, so this is one of those things that again, we're not asking the board to adopt this calendar tonight. And I say that because I don't want people to run out and get on Expedia and start booking their trips based upon what they heard tonight or saw tonight. We anticipate this would be the calendar, but just make sure that we just presenting to the board, and then at the next business meeting, we'll have the board to have this on the agenda piece of it as well. So Beck, you want to talk about some quick highlights?
So thank you. As Dr. Robinson mentioned, the calendar highlights the proposed vacation days on there. In addition, we're operating with 184 instructional days that are designated next year. Keeping the parent-teacher conferences in December as we have in the past. And just trying to continue to highlight some of the testing that's taking place with ELA and math on the calendar. No other real substantive changes.
Yeah, just again, one thing that we know will be is graduation on the 23rd. Where graduation will be, it will be to be determined. So we know that for sure. Graduation will be on the 23rd. so we'll see how that pans out. As we have no idea where things are going or not going, so we don't want to make speculation. But in short order, I mean, quite frankly, in a couple of weeks we're going to have to make those kind of decisions for next year because venues go fast, as you probably imagine. So right now, SPAC is the venue that we have gone to every year. And likelihood on barring something that prevents SPAC from doing it. And I know people loved graduation outside last year, but Mother Nature was wonderful to us, and we saw that by 11:30. It's not being a sexist, not male versus female. By 11:30, all those young ladies were taking their shoes off, and they're up to their calves were burning because that heat was coming out of the turf. And we thought, like, oh my God, thank you, we're going to be done soon, because otherwise it would have been awful for a lot of people. So it's great. It was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful graduation experience last year. But there's so many factors at play, and so I take that in mind because we want every experience for our students to be great. The streaming will continue regardless of where we are, because I think that's a great resource for families who can't be in person, that they can watch live from wherever they are. So that's a wonderful resource for us as well. So the calendar is there. It's a tight calendar. This year's a tight calendar, 184 days. And so we watch snow events and all emergency use and all those kind of things as well with the calendar. So this is what we're looking at. And spring break is what people always concern themselves about. So spring break right now is probably likely going to be the week of April 10th. And one of the debacle that we ran into a few years ago, remember we had 2 different spring breaks between cross BOCES. And the BOCES got together to have the commonality of everyone having spring break at the same time. Because the worst thing you have is that I live in Boston Spa, and I work at Shen, and we have 2 different spring break dates because we're in 2 different BOCES. And so that's a great commonality we have with that piece of it. February break is comparable to this February break, the week of the 20th as well. So those are the big ones as we move forward. And I put this out there because it comes up every year. People ask about Pi Day, the 23rd of November. I guess that's why people bake pies before Thanksgiving. It's not the mathematical pie. And so people always want their day off, but again, if we give that day off, now we're down to 183. So we put out there fairly to all the unions, and a lot of school districts are now moving towards having superintendent's conference day prior to Labor Day. And we put out there, it's not a criticism. We put out there the option of doing superintendent's day prior to Labor Day, and we could move the 23rd off, so one-on-one trade-off. And we respect the fact that they didn't want to engage it, which is fine. I mean, it is what it is. I just put out there because sometimes as board members you hear that, why can't we have off because another school district having off, and not understanding what's the give or the concession that was made in that particular school district calendar or otherwise. And sometimes even with Jewish holidays, days people don't recognize versus days other people recognize. So those are some of the factors and nuances that when we hear why can't we be like, there are other nuances at play. So does that make some sense? I hope that makes some sense. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. So I know, Mr. Stevens, if you want to have this later on, I just kind of put as a running piece on the agenda. If there are any conversations surrounding for the I just put on a running piece. I didn't have anything to present, just to put as a topic for in case the board want to have any continued discussion.
Yeah, I think we do. I think we need to continue this discussion for the next couple of meetings. So we saw one mosaic. Dr. Robinson shared that, right? The phase 1, 2, what that may look like. I know we had questions about that. As we continue to engage and further the conversation on what full-day kindergarten would look like at Shenendehowa, if in fact we go that way. Gusta and I met with Dr. Robinson, with Kathy Wentmore Chase, to talk to commercial sales in the town of Clifton Park / Half Moon to see some sites that may be available. So we're still in the discovery phase of that. More to come as that gets vetted a little bit more. So let me stop there because we have the documents. Is there anybody that wants to continue or have questions on where we are? Any thoughts?
So the only question I have, and I don't know if this is feasible or not, let's say we decide we're going to go the route of building another school, and that's going to give us the space we need for full-day kindergarten. Is there an opportunity for us to bring in temporary classrooms so we don't have to wait until that school is built? Or is that not something that is feasible?
So it's feasible, and we have actually done that. I'm looking at Kathy. I can't find Kathy.
It's over here.
Okay. We have, and I think we still have temporary curlers at Octay and Chango. Did we move the one from Chango? I know we have an Octay, so we have done some of that, and at one point when we were doing some reconstruction at the high school, we brought some temporary classrooms at the high school way back when. Obviously they're not the same experience, but there's a possibility. So we have done that, and a lot of times it's because the renovation within the building is so disruptive of, and so the temporary pieces recognize that. So yeah, that's a feasibility. And certainly one of those things that once we get down that road and try to lay out what other option is, that's certainly a possibility.
Okay, good question, Todd. Anybody else tonight?
I just wanted to go back to, and I know I've mentioned this before, so forgive me if I sound like a broken record, but sort of along the lines of really what Todd was saying is that, what could we be doing in the interim?
Right now, rebalancing and whatnot.
Right,
Yeah.
and so with the rebalancing, I also feel like even with the mosaic analysis, it would help, in planning where we could, even whether we place temporary buildings or, the layout of the land, so that we just know what we have in inventory.
Mhm.
And it's hard to know that, with the way the buildings are currently positioned.
And that's a big part of that, what they're gonna do. In fact, when I said, I thought it was Monday meeting with Callis, tomorrow meeting with Callis, we have another meeting, but we always try to piggyback things in terms of how do we jumpstart some of this, I wanna say phase one process as soon as we can. And a lot of it is survey to understand how buildings are used now. We could look at the footprint of the map, but that doesn't necessarily tell actual utilization of the building. And then from that, you start talking about what other potential options for utilization, all those kind of things. So that's the assess, you can use the word inventory, it's truly just trying to assess current use and trying to then anticipate what potential or flexibility we have for future use. Because I don't know if you noticed on the federal tracker, one of the first thing up there, we're talking about extended day K, trying to add some additional piece. We're in the process right now, as a part of that, going through to see what spaces do we have, or can we create, or can we utilize, even to add extra classroom for the extended day K, which obviously builds into the potential of full-day K. So all those things are part of that process, and hopefully we'll have a contract. I'm not sure if we're going to have anything for Tuesday's board meeting for the board to approve for Mosaic, but clearly we have made a commitment to them based upon my understanding from the board that they can get that process rolling. So we're going to be rolling with that process. It's not like we're going out of business. It's not like we already have other contracts with them to get that process rolling as soon as we can, and then the contract piece will come some point down the road as things materialize.
For
the study piece.
For just the study piece, okay.
And the study piece is in multiple pieces, so it's going to evolve.
Right, and so in your other plan, you had talked about, I guess it's part of phase one, the survey piece for the community. So how does that fit in, to pull the community into this?
Again, that's something that, one of the pieces that I think, so that's part of it. The question is time and sequence, right?
Right.
And so right now, at least from my vantage point, trying to get the architectural piece, getting some actual understanding of what we have, don't have, know, don't know, is important before you go asking questions and don't know what we have, don't have. And once we have that, Lindsay and I already spoke about fashioning some type of survey document that we can figure about timing, where we are as a school, where we are with different work, Is it something early spring, late spring, that we try to get, again, another source of information from people? And that's something clearly, once we start looking at questions, those things will be vetted with the board to make sure that, because one of the things as board members you bring is that you bring their perspective as parents, you bring their perspective as community members, and so again, we don't want to just to find out from people with 3 or 4-year-old kids at home. This is something that all the voters of this community eventually at some point is going to have to support through a referendum vote, be it capital project referendum, budget referendum. So getting a broad-based view from the public is going to be important. So I don't have a time frame for that yet, Naomi, but I think part of that will evolve as we go through this first phase of trying to see what we know or don't know as a school system.
In the first phase you're referring to is
The architectural piece.
of this one right here.
We're just talking about tomorrow with Cal.
Okay.
Just one question, just for that piece. Do we know yet, or do we have a sense internally kind of like what we think we need for full day pay to help us figure out, like, when you're doing the architectural assessment,
Yeah.
like?
We do based upon, and it's certainly, so it's not surgical science, right? We do largely, and with that being the case, anytime we construct anything, we try to overbuild anyway. You want to build for future potential. We're never going to build something to say we build it for 20, because 10 years from now it could be 21, and who wants to be that person who built something for 20? Versus, so we build for that potential of growth capacity, not only traditional classroom, but programming. And when you think about, people think about schools as just a traditional classroom. A lot of spaces, a lot of times, all the other stuff, all the other requirements that said, for every this, you need to have 2 of those. For every this, you need to have 3 of those. And all those things that cause the space, and that's why this, back to this study piece, gives us that perspective of what we can actually do before we're going to have to add on or do something else in order to meet whatever the code specifications are or otherwise. So we have a broad sense, and that's how, so we're not starting off blank. We're starting off with this assumption of, okay, if this is the minimum standard, then what's the ideal, and then what's the difference between those two, right, so to speak.
I got one more question full of today.
You're full of it?
So,
Oh, sorry,
side 2.
okay, sorry.
Is there ever been thought, or is it possible for us to consider, because we're such a big school district, could we do a phased approach where we say, and again, I'm throwing this out there, let's say Octay has rooms and there's need. Could we roll out full-day kindergarten at a school level versus a district level to bring that up to speed, or would there be issues with that?
Mass chaos.
Yeah.
Short answer, yes.
I didn't say it was a good
My
idea.
blood
You know,
pressure just went up.
that was a good question though, Ty.
That's a good question,
That was
because
a
I'm
good
sure, yeah.
That was good, that was an out-of-the-box question.
Yeah, it would be, and not to prolong this and this additional questions, but your question when you said Octay brings in, again, another dimension of when we think about facilities, is looking at the community growth. And so Octay is actually the one that right now I'm watching very closely personally, because there's a development that's going behind Octay, and it's a significant development. And once those houses are constructed, typically it's about 2 or 3 years before the impact of those houses start to have. And beyond the Dunkin' Donuts, if you know what I'm talking about, exit park and ride, there's another significant development that's going on down there. I don't know the details of that yet, because every time I want to stop and read the sign. So there's another one. So because it was so close to that school, if or when, or should I probably say when, those developments mature, it's going to have a direct impact on that school's capacity, which causes a ripple effect. Scano, Orangen, right away. Orangen hit Chattacombe, Scano hit Tasago. And so the ripple effect is we can't wait to say, oh my God, next year we have a over whatever. That's where we're kind of looking at some of those kind of things now and trying to understand the dynamics of those construction overflows. In the same way, we're watching some of the growth in Half Moon and seeing how that's going to potentially come from Carrigan to Chattacombe, because if you look at the boundaries, how they interlay. So those are some of the factors too that we have to consider. Sometimes it's not necessarily because we get more kids per se, but where are the housing population and the kid population moving? So give you a perfect example, the Vischer Ferry side, this side of Vischer Ferry, when all those houses went, I forgot what the development is called, close to where you live. When that development went in, we all thought, oh my God, these are big houses, they're gonna be populated with a lot of kids, but they didn't produce as many children as anticipated because of the size of the houses, right? As we anticipate would come from particular sizes of house. Versus we have a huge stock of the Van Patten houses, all those country nodes, east, west, north, south. Those are the ones we also watching very carefully because the market space right now with the housing market, those are large houses, 4 or 5 bedroom houses, most of them are 30 plus years. And the price point is, if you want to say reasonable in comparison to new construction houses and what's going to be the turnover there. So I share that with the board because not that one thing doesn't preclude another thing, but all these things have to be taken into consideration as we think about capacity for schools and spaces, and all those things have to be taken into consideration. So it's not just do this for this specific purpose and we're good. It's how does this fit into the larger schema of things. So this spring, we'll be probably more likely having the futures, trying to revamp some of the futures committee. We have a committee called Futures Committee that is kind of ad hoc, only comes up every 3 or 4. I think last time, like 4 years, 5 years ago, we were active. Then we're going to try to revamp that to try to get a sense of all those other factors at play in the community, economic factors and otherwise, that we need to take into consideration planning forward, because all those factors we also have to then provide to the state to justify why we are looking to build a certain type of facility, to justify the aidability on those facilities.
And you saw the timeline of what this takes tonight, right? So you can't just flip a switch and say, here we're going.
So all those pieces are on the radar. So I guess that's the point I'm trying to make to the board, that it's just not one thing, it's many major things that we have to align, the kaleidoscope, align all these pieces and plan forward.
Was it the Futures Committee that worked on the rebalancing plan?
That was a part of when we did, so redistricting was, so that process was actually in the make before I got to Shen. In fact, I used to leave Mahanas and come here to come to redistricting meetings. So that was 05, and we resolved it by 06, 07, and it finally actually going to 08 when Shattercon came online. And so that was a part of that. But that prompted then for us to have this futures look, which was also prompted by the whole movement of global foundries coming in and all these big pieces. And so what's the economic impact of the district? What's the potential housing? And we saw that there are communities that eroded, that developed as a result of global founders coming on board. So that's when we really start looking at futures committee, saying, what is the future of the school district, taking in consideration all these factors at play. So that's how, so it was related to that piece of it, and now it still gives us a sense of what's the growth capacity, what's our current capacity, when do we have to get really anxious, the issue, like when is it a concern versus a problem versus a crisis, right? And so that's what the Futures Committee gave us their report, and we looked at that twice over the course of the different years, and so it's about time again to revisit all those things because so much has changed as a community and otherwise, and so it's time for us to refresh the entire perspective again in terms of industries and things of that nature.
Okay.
So that's it for me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, no further comments? Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, I usually follow Becky.
I know.
Sorry about that. So we have 2 retirements that I'd like to recognize tonight. Mr. Jack Hogan is retiring after 15 years as a building maintenance mechanic, and Mrs. Patricia McConnell is retiring after 20 years as a special education teacher. So those are the 2 retirements.
Congratulations, Jack and Patricia. Amazing. Okay. All right, any questions for Jill? Mrs. Bush, thank you very much. All right. So 2 action items tonight, staffing recommendations. Can I have a motion? Bob is first, Todd is second. All in favor? Motion passes. Contract Expressive Journeys LLC. Can I get a motion? Jason is first. Stacy is second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Motion passes. Okay. then moving on to for the good of the order, I think a few of us have something to say tonight. I will start out. So, as you know, I've been watching, and obviously the last few days have been a little hectic for the last 24 hours with emails and texts and whatnot. So, you know, we look at all of that, we respond, and not only that, I do take into account some of the things that I hear verbally, I see with my eyes in social media, and I try to respond to make sure that people acknowledge that, I mean, we acknowledge that people are active. And my term that I used the last time at the last meeting was engagement. And, you know, when I say the word engagement, in my own mind, I've been very engaged with this district since 2008. I consider engagement being present, not always physically present. You can be present. I mean, I'm noticing that times of our meetings, people are concerned. I mean, they have smaller children. They're putting their children to bed at this time. Okay, you can't see the meeting. You're not here physically at the meeting, but you can watch the meeting at your own leisure after. So that's engagement. Commenting is engagement. Speaking with other community members is engagement. Standing up for what you believe in is engagement. Not a way to berate. I just saw some negative comments that I was noting that people at the community conversation, because we had so much feedback about our plans and COVID and what we've been enduring for the last 24 months, that we only had so many people at the community conversation. Again, maybe the timing of the day. Maybe we need to look at that at some point. But you know, we can't make everybody happy. I'm convinced, I understand that. I'm a people pleaser sometimes, but I understand we cannot do that. When I talk about engagement, it's what is important to this district. I would not turn anybody away. I think everybody knows me, that you could call me up on my cell phone and have a conversation with me. So I just wanted to kind of talk about engagement for a split second. Yeah, so that's my soapbox for tonight. And please, for the next couple of days, this is hairy for everybody. This isn't something that is an easy decision, but like Naomi was saying, we always believe in, I write in my emails all the time, safety for our students and our staff. Safety is number one. May not be the popular decision that is being made, but it's what is best for all of the students in this district. I'll stop there. So, anybody else have any comments for tonight?
I actually have a question. Dr. Robinson, I was on a partnership meeting yesterday, and some of the parents at the elementary level are chomping at the bit to get back into school, to do work in the library or whatever. Is there anything we can tell them or give them that would give them some information?
So let me circle back with you
Yep.
on that piece of it, because ironically, that sort of came up, informal survey, I think, I'm not sure, I'm not gonna say his colleague, but was asking, it was more a question, actually it was related to even what we're doing with winter sports and spectators and all those kind of things. And my comment were, we're providing the full experience for our kids. So with that being said, you're right. Honestly, that's one dimension that in my mind is not as visible, but something we have to think about, and something that certainly we'll have that conversation with building level admin folks and kind of see what their feel or what their takes are, because I'm sure that there are things that we can do now, taking certain protocols in mind as we move forward. So let me circle back with you on that one. And in fact, we have a district partnership team meeting tomorrow, I think. So that'd be a good, if you don't mind, are you going to be here?
Yeah.
So can you bring that up as well, so kind of get some flavor from the different buildings as well? That'd be a good opportunity to kind of get some immediate feedback from.
Sure. Is
from
that
the
in
building
person?
level. I think we're going to do virtual, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I'll check while we go to the next one.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Bob?
There's two, second one is my first Shen shout out. First one though is a response to an email, an email that was read by a board president at the last meeting. And a resident of the community asked about what our thoughts on raising the possibility of allocating funds for surveys involving student mental health. And I interjected, I asked for, what do these things look like? Can you show us more evidence of what is meant by these surveys? And the person who wrote the letter, Mr. Templeton, sent quite a few links, about 6 or 7 links. So I sat down and researched that. I thought this was a very good line of inquiry, and it really taught me a lot about where we are with social emotional learning. So we've been through this very intense period with focusing on COVID. You saw a lot of that discussed on today's meeting. But back in June of this past summer, we had a very detailed presentation of our social emotional learning. And I think that put a lot of things in place that we probably have not spent as much time with. But what I've done is I've looked through that presentation. We already have surveys discussed and laid out for high school and middle school in there. All right, so we have attempted to survey students at that level. I also had a discussion with my partnership team. I work with Scano, and I did that yesterday, and this came up, and they said very good things about something called second steps, and that is in the SEL presentation. So what that leads me to believe is we got to look at this thing in terms of what was presented to us in June. We have our discussion of mid-year goals coming up next month. That's a great way to take a pulse. Are we on track? Are we ahead? Are we behind? But do we have a plan to get back on track? And I think that is the way to tie this inquiry from the resident that came forward. We may find that the surveys are doing exactly what they should be doing. We may find that they're missing the mark, but we would want to hear from our experts, the people that have to work with it, in a way that we typically do. You know, we generally cast the die on goals during the summer. SEL was discussed in June, and then we moved right into a lot of intensive COVID discussions through August. But I think the plan's fairly sound. And let's simply continue what we normally do, review the goals, have the give and take as needed. If we need more help, if it's not satisfying everybody involved, okay, let's identify what else needs to be done. And in that context, would we want to consider paying for surveys? I think we have to look at the total plan, okay? It seems like we are surveying with what we have developed as a district, and that may be a sufficient baseline. If not, or if we are doing that, then I would say we probably don't want to fund it. We don't want to fund additional surveys because we probably want to spend the money somewhere else. If our experts come to us and they say, we didn't do as well, here's why, then that is a great way to discuss, do we want to fund more at that point? So I thought this was a great line of inquiry because I think we see how the district receives letters where someone says, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you paying for this? And they're looking at it in a very narrow way. And we all have to understand that. That's their view of what the problem is. But our view is that we have this continuum of planning, we have a continuum of budgeting, a continuance of the goals process. And when I look at other districts, and we do this over the years when we go to the convention, a lot of districts don't have that. We have these two things going on at different times throughout the year that do provide the right information back to assess and double down if we have to, or say, look, we did what we planned and here's what we learned from it. We could probably spend our money better elsewhere. So that's my take on the discussion. Hopefully that puts it to rest. So hopefully that answers what came through on the letter. And it's more of a stay tuned through February. Second item is the Shen shout out. So that was also discussed on the meeting. I was just very impressed with the equity, diversity, and inclusion meeting that we had as a district. I'm impressed, and I'm just going to show the slides, but you can do this at the next meeting, next opportunity to discuss equity, diversity, and inclusion. But this is a slide that answers something really well for me. I tend to look at one of the bigger challenges we have is how do we have these challenging conversations with people from different perspectives and backgrounds. To me, that's what's missing in society right now. How do we get to the point where you can have that meeting or have that conversation and have the group move in a way that everybody benefits? And this slide right here, it's got the circle, it's called community agreements. It just shows me how I could do that. Because I never really thought, how do I plan that out? How do I, I'm looking at it from my perspective, but this is a way to say, other people have gone down this path. I like that comment in the lower right, lean into discomfort. Because that's what I think is missing in society. We need to have these different perspectives having these conversations. And the next slide after that really spoke about how do you get people on a unified approach to what's really needed. And it's the uncontested universal truths. So every parent believes this. I cannot think of any parent at Shen that doesn't believe in these three things. They believe their child is a gift, their child has untapped potential, and their child deserves to be supported to succeed. Right? Can you think of anybody that doesn't believe that? All right? And that's a great way to say, okay, how do I unify people in a common path on equity, on diversity and inclusion? So I think that was very helpful to me. We've had these discussions, and the point is, you got to keep having them. The last thing I'd like to point out are two comments that came right at the end of the meeting. One of the things that Dr. Robinson conveyed is that he gets folks wanting him to provide a specific project or a specific ticket or say, this is the thing we need to do next. And we don't have, what we need to do next is to continue to have these conversations, particularly amongst leaders. There's not just one thing that can be brought into the mix that will say, yes, that's going to advance it. No, it's having these discussions and going through that discomfort, but also realizing everybody has these universal and contested truths. And the other comment I heard that quickly followed is that, and that's what someone said, and that's why we don't have a diversity, equity, inclusion person assigned by title in the district. This is not something we say, one person does this, okay? Because it's so darn important, everybody has to have these conversations, whether it be the superintendent, whether it be the board, whether it be people in the buildings, whether it be people in staffs. It has to be done if you want to advance the cause here. So I felt this was very useful to me. I think that that's my idea of what a Shen shout-out is. If you see something that works, definitely want to bring it up to the table because you can expand it to a broader audience, and I look forward to whatever letters might come my way on that too. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
So if it's okay, I wanted to just ask a point of clarification when you were talking about the email that came from the resident in the community. So as I recall, the request was for universal screening. Is that what you're referring to when you say the surveys that are being done?
I see it as the surveys meeting that.
Meeting the need of the universal screening.
Yes, but I may have that wrong. You know, what I see is it is, you know, the way the links described it, you know, they did not have a specific medical protocol per se. I think what we have in our schools is something that our experts have sat down and put together their best effort, but it starts a baseline. And we're using the term baseline because I think this helps to guide us if, you know, a student early in the year is putting feedback in there to a certain level and then it's getting worse. Okay, that would help to guide us that that person needs further assistance.
Okay. Actually, this was really good that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Mr. Templeton will hear this and can address that.
Yeah, but either way,
right.
you know, it could be a mismatch of expectations.
It could be.
And so, you know, I'm one person here, and I think a survey is the same thing as a screening. A medical professional could say something different. We have people on our staff that could say, there's a difference, and we have to understand that, and there's a different value if there's a difference. Is that something you would pay for? Do you pay for that versus something else? And those are all things that we should figure out here.
And I do have a Shen shout-out. So mine is, I wanted to share, I went to one of the seed committee meetings. Stacy asked me to attend, and thank you for that. And it was during that meeting that I heard an update from Mrs. Headwell regarding Styrofoam Trays. So we don't have them in the district anymore. This is something I know that she had been working on years ago because of a project that a group of kids I was working with had gone to her about how to get rid of Styrofoam trays. And back then they were proposing like having mealworms eat the tray. It was a lot of fun. It was a little gross too. But that was when I first learned that she was working to get quotes to also move to something other than Styrofoam. But Styrofoam at that time was so inexpensive, it was just hard to make that move. But she did it earlier this year, and she hit the New York State mandate, which was by January 1st, we had to move completely away from Styrofoam trays. And so now we have paper trays. And so that's the Shen shout out. Kudos to Mrs. Headwell. She's the Director of Food Services. I thought that was just pretty awesome.
Awesome. Okay, anybody else? Motion to adjourn. Trustees first, Todd is second, all in favor?